In the summer of 1946, something mysterious happened to Georgia O'Keeffe. For 10 long days, she vanished from public view. No letters, no phone calls, no paintings, no one knew where she went. It was not the first time she had disappeared from the world, but this time it came after the death of Alfred Stieglitz, the man who had shaped her life and fame. People whispered that grief had finally broken her. Others believed she had gone into the desert to find herself again. When she returned, she said nothing about where she had been. The silence was louder than any confession. That brief disappearance became a symbol of the loneliness that followed her through life. A woman celebrated for her independence, but haunted by emptiness. To understand those missing days, we must look at the path that led her there, from her strict childhood to her rise as one of America's most powerful painters, and the deep emotional wounds that fame could never heal. Georgia O'Keeffe was born in 1887 on a dairy farm in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. While other children played with dolls or chased chickens, Georgia stared at the sky and fields, watching how the wind changed colors. She said later that she always knew she wanted to be an artist. Her parents encouraged her talent, but life in rural America offered few chances for women to study art seriously. Still, she dreamed big. In school, she practiced drawing plants, animals, and small details, the curve of a leaf, the shadow of a cloud, details most people ignored. After high school, she moved to Chicago and later New York to study art, but she soon grew tired of copying European styles. "I want something of my own," she once said. In a world where male artists ruled every gallery, Georgia dared to think differently. She wanted to paint not what she saw, but what she felt. That idea would later change the course of American art forever. By her mid-20s, O'Keeffe was teaching art in Texas to survive. Life was simple but lonely. The desert around her was empty, dry, and endless, but yet it spoke to her. She began creating abstract drawings that captured the shapes and rhythms of nature rather than copying them directly. A friend showed these drawings to Alfred Stieglitz, a famous photographer and gallery owner in New York. He was fascinated. Without asking, he displayed them in his gallery in 1916, calling them revolutionary. When Georgia found out, she was shocked and angry, but also curious. Their meeting would change both their lives. Stieglitz was almost twice her age, married, and already a legend in the art world. But he saw something rare in her work: purity, emotion, freedom. He began promoting her paintings, calling her the greatest woman artist in America. Soon he left his wife and started living with Georgia. What began as artistic admiration turned into a complicated love story filled with passion, jealousy, and control. Through Stieglitz's influence, Georgia became famous in New York during the 1920s. Her large paintings of flowers, bones, and landscapes were unlike anything people had seen. Critics claimed her flower paintings symbolized feminine sexuality, a meaning she always denied. "I just paint what I feel inside me," she said. But fame came with a price. Stieglitz often exhibited nude photographs of her body, saying they were art, not scandal. Georgia trusted him, yet over time she realized he was shaping her image more than she was. He wanted her to be both his muse and masterpiece. Behind the success, she struggled with anxiety and exhaustion. The constant attention made her feel trapped. She loved Stieglitz deeply, but feared she was losing herself in his shadow. The more people called her Mrs. Stieglitz, the more she longed for silence and space. Freedom, the thing she valued most, was slipping away. By the early 1930s, O'Keeffe's health collapsed. She could not sleep, eat, or paint. Doctors called it a nervous breakdown. The pressure of fame, her failing relationship, and endless exhibitions had drained her completely. For months, she stayed in hospitals and rest homes, doing nothing but stare at the ceiling. When she recovered, she made a life-changing decision: to leave New York and go to New Mexico. The desert, with its red hills, animal bones, and open skies, gave her peace. There, she found a new source of inspiration. She painted skulls floating over mountains and bright blue skies stretching forever. These works became some of her most famous pieces, bold, strange, and beautiful. Alone in the desert, she rebuilt herself. She learned that solitude was not loneliness. It was power. The wind, rocks, and silence became her companions. For the first time, she could paint without noise, judgment, or control. But even in peace, the past still followed her like a shadow. In 1946, Alfred Stieglitz died of a stroke. Georgia rushed back to New York for the funeral. He had been her lover, mentor, and tormentor for more than 20 years. His death left her empty and lost. After the funeral, she returned to New Mexico and vanished for 10 days. Some say she went deep into the desert, walking alone, refusing to eat or speak. Others say she stayed in a small adobe house with no phone or visitors. No one truly knows. When she reappeared, she looked calm but distant, as if part of her had died too. She never explained where she went. Perhaps it was her way of mourning, or perhaps she simply wanted to disappear from the world that had taken so much from her. That short silence became one of the most mysterious moments in art history. From then on, she lived quietly in the desert, painting less, speaking little, and keeping her emotions locked away. In the decades that followed, GeorgiaOKeeffe became a symbol of strength and independence. She built her own home in Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, surrounded by cliffs and wild animals. Even in old age, she hiked through the desert with her brushes and paints. Reporters called her the mother of American modernism, but she hated being labeled. She simply wanted to paint what she loved: the light, the land, the bones. As her eyesight weakened in her 90s, she began sculpting and working with clay. Friends said she never complained. "You work with what you have," she told them. She lived to be 98, almost a century old. When she died in 1986, her ashes were scattered over the desert she adored. The woman who once vanished into silence finally became part of the landscape she spent her life painting. GeorgiaOKeeffe's story is not just about art. It is about endurance, loneliness, and self-discovery. She proved that a woman could survive and succeed in a world that doubted her at every step. Her paintings still hang in museums across the world, glowing with color and emotion. But her greatest artwork may have been her life itself, a journey from control to freedom, from noise to silence. The 10 days she disappeared remind us that even the strongest souls sometimes need to step away from the world to find peace. She once said, "I have things in my head that are not like what anyone has taught me." That is what made her different. GeorgiaOKeeffe did not just paint flowers or bones. She painted the language of her soul. And in doing so, she left behind a legacy that continues to inspire dreamers, artists, and anyone who dares to be truly themselves. In the summer of 1946, something mysterious happened to GeorgiaOKeeffe. For 10 long days, she vanished from public view. No letters, no phone calls, no paintings, no one knew where she went. It was not the first time she had disappeared from the world, but this time it came after the death of Alfred Stieglitz, the man who had shaped her life and fame. People whispered that grief had finally broken her. Others believed she had gone into the desert to find herself again. When she returned, she said nothing about where she had been. Her silence became as famous as her art. That brief disappearance reflected the struggle she carried inside all her life, the battle between needing love and needing freedom. She had spent decades being watched, admired, and analyzed. Now, finally, she chose to vanish into the silence of the land she loved. But to understand those 10 missing days, we must look back at the long, painful, and extraordinary path that brought her there. A journey from a curious child on a farm to one of the most powerful artists in American history. Georgia. O'Keeffe was born in 1887 on a dairy farm in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. Her parents were hardworking farmers who wanted their children to have a better life. Georgia was different from the start. While her siblings helped with chores, she would stare at clouds, watch how the wind bent grass, and study the tiny patterns in leaves. She once said she could remember deciding to be an artist at the age of 10. Her parents supported her dream, but the world around her offered little encouragement for a young girl who wanted to paint. Art was not considered a serious path, especially for women. Still, she kept practicing. When she studied at the Art Institute of Chicago and later in New York, she learned the traditional techniques of drawing and painting. But she soon grew restless. She felt trapped, copying still lifes and portraits that looked like everyone else's. She wanted to express what she felt instead of what she saw. When she later discovered modern art and abstract ideas, she realized that art could come from emotion and imagination, not just imitation. That realization freed her. She started experimenting with forms, lines, and color, a decision that would later make her one of the pioneers of modern American art. By her mid-20s, O'Keeffe was teaching art in Texas. The wide open spaces and bright skies of the desert filled her with wonder. There, she began to paint abstract shapes that captured the rhythm of the land, not what it looked like, but how it felt. One of her friends showed these experimental drawings to Alfred Stieglitz, a legendary photographer and gallery owner in New York. Stieglitz was fascinated. Without even asking, he exhibited her work in his famous 291 gallery in 1916. When Georgia found out, she was angry but also intrigued. She traveled to New York to meet him, and their meeting sparked one of the most intense and complicated relationships in art history. Stieglitz was almost twice her age, married and deeply influential in the art world. He had discovered and promoted many artists, but none impressed him as much as O'Keeffe. He believed she was the purest artistic spirit he had ever seen. Soon, their professional admiration turned into love. He left his wife, and Georgia moved to New York to live with him. It was the beginning of both her greatest love story and her deepest heartbreak. With Stieglitz's help, O'Keeffe's art career exploded. Her flower paintings, enormous close-up images that looked both innocent and sensual, captured the attention of critics and collectors. Newspapers called her the woman who paints like a man. Stieglitz arranged exhibitions, wrote articles about her, and photographed her endlessly. He called her my muse, my soul, but fame came at a heavy cost. Stieglitz's photographs of her, some nude, some intimate, were shown publicly, causing scandal. Though Georgia trusted him, she soon realized that he was shaping her public image in ways she could not control. He wanted her to be his masterpiece, not just an artist in her own right. While Stieglitz's reputation grew, Georgia's independence began to fade. She loved him deeply but struggled against his control. Their love was passionate but filled with jealousy and arguments. When he began an affair with a younger woman in the 1920s, O'Keeffe's emotional world collapsed. The woman who had always valued freedom now found herself trapped in heartbreak and fame. By the early 1930s, O'Keeffe could no longer cope with the pressure. She suffered a nervous breakdown and spent months in recovery. It was a turning point. When she finally returned to painting, she decided to leave New York and Stieglitz behind, at least for a while. She traveled to New Mexico, a place that would define the rest of her life. The vast, empty desert gave her what New York never could: silence, peace, and space. She found beauty in the skulls of animals, in dry bones, in mountains shaped by wind and time. To her, they were not symbols of death, but of endurance. Living alone, she painted what she saw and felt: the strength of nature, the purity of form, the endless horizon. Her paintings of white bones floating over blue skies became icons of American art. The bones seem to cut sharply to the center of something that is keenly alive on the desert, she said. For the first time, she was painting for herself, not for Stieglitz, not for critics, not for anyone else. In 1946, Alfred Stieglitz suffered a stroke and died. He was 82. For Georgia, his death was like losing both an enemy and a soulmate. She rushed back to New York to attend his funeral. She stayed long enough to arrange his affairs, pack his things, and face a city filled with memories she no longer wanted. After the funeral, she went home to New Mexico and disappeared for 10 days. No one knew where she went. Some believed she isolated herself in the mountains near Ghost Ranch, wandering through canyons, sleeping under the stars. Others said she locked herself in her house, refusing to speak to anyone. When she returned, she was silent and calm, as if she had gone somewhere beyond pain. She never explained what happened. It was her final act of privacy in a life lived under public eyes. That mysterious disappearance became a reflection of her inner world, a woman who, after losing everything, needed to vanish to find herself again. After Stieglitz's death, Georgia focused completely on her art. She built her own adobe home in Abiquiu, New Mexico, overlooking the rugged red cliffs. It was simple and quiet, filled with natural light. She woke early, painted for hours, then took long walks through the desert. Visitors described her as strong, proud, and private. She avoided gossip, disliked interviews, and rarely smiled for cameras. Yet, those who knew her closely saw warmth behind her steel exterior. She loved